Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Yep, very, very much appreciated. Had some lovely emails from Brave New Spirits. They really enjoyed last week's episode of the show. I think they were quite happy with the balanced appraisal of their bottlings, and well, everybody should know by now that when I do an episode of the show, I always try and give a balanced appraisal of everything that's on the show. So no exception this week, as they say. And as you can see from the title page, we're doing something a little bit different. It's a rum episode of the show, because I enjoy a rum episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to Speciality Drinks for all the samples for today's episode of the show. That's what links all of these three different brands, for want of a better word. They're all distributed by Speciality Drinks, and no, they don't know that I'm doing this episode of the show, so it'll be a bit of well, not a shock to them, but anyway. So the real reason, I guess, was basically to look at the Black Tot Finest Caribbean, and the reason I wanted to look at that was because basically they have changed the blend of rums that go into that particular bottling. Now, it's quite unusual for blends, whether they're whiskey or any other type of spirit, to change because basically, as everybody knows, once a customer or a consumer sort of likes a particular blend, that's what they want to see time and time again. So, blenders spend an inordinate length of time, attempting to make every batch seem as close to the previous batch as possible. So when you start playing around with your blend, and they have actually done quite a shift with the Black Tot, and one assumes that the reason behind that is probably, I would imagine, not being able to source all the raw materials that they actually wanted to use, and generally speaking, that's what tends to sort of like make blenders change blends, generally speaking. Sometimes if they're a limited edition blend, as you well know, it may well be just something else they want to play around with, but a sort of standard, for want of a better word, blend, like I said, the consumer wants consistency. They want to know that it tastes the same today as it does in a year or so's time. So taking a bit of a risk. So that was the main premise of this week's episode of the show, is to take a look at the difference, because I don't often get that opportunity. It's just happened to be that Speciality Drinks kindly sent me a sample of the new blend, and I happened to have a bottle of the old blend left, which I purchased, and obviously so I could do the comparison, and then I thought, well, it would be rude not to use the other samples that they kindly sent me. So as you know, Black Tot was kind of envisaged as a kind of more modern take on the historic Royal Navy rum, and well, let's put it this way, the old sort of, I must admit, I've never tasted sort of proper Royal Navy 1800s rum for obvious reasons, and let's put it this way, it wasn't called grog for nothing, should we say, and I would imagine that sort of quality blend was probably the last thing on the Admiralty's mind when they actually sort of thought about handing out sort of like a tot of rum to their sailors. So it was probably pretty rough old stuff, heavily caramelised, and although the current, maybe there isn't, maybe they've got away with it. I mean, certainly I would have thought there's probably a little bit there, maybe, to sort of even out the sort of the colour, but we will see when we taste it. The second, I guess, range that I'm going to look at is called the Transcontinental Rum Line. Now, this is a brand that's been created by La Maison de Whisky in Paris, and they Speciality Drinks and La Maison de Whisky do seem to sort of have quite a sort of a close relationship. So I don't know too much about the range, but it would appear that it's a kind of like an independent sort of rum line, bottling rums from different countries and different distilleries, by the looks of things. And the last bottling I'll be looking at is in a range called Providence. Sorry. This is a collaboration. The distillery was founded by this collaboration, the Distillery du Port-au-Prince in Haiti. And it was, like I said, it was a project between, again, La Maison du Whisky and Vellier, who do a lot of independent rum bottlings, and the local partners, the Liege family. So basically, three different brands. Some in cask strength, some not. So one's butt is full. Oh, yes, I know. Anyway, let's take a look at today's lineup, shall we? Right, so like I said, we're going to kick off with firstly the old, or the original bottling of Black Tot Finest Caribbean Rum, bottled at 46.2%. The original blend was 60% Guyana, 35% Barbados and 5% Jamaican. Then we're going to move on to the second of the two Black Tots. So this is the new blend, same ABV, slightly different makeup. So this time it's 40% Barbados, 5-year-old spirit. Now they actually tell you the actual age of the spirit. I don't know what the ages of the previous ones were. It's 35% 2 to 4-year-old Trinidadian rum, 20% 0 to 5-year-old Guyanan, and 5% 3-year-old Jamaican. So it would appear that they might not have been able to get hold of, you know, the quantity of Guyanan rum from one imagines Diamond, which is a bit of a surprise really, because Diamond is not exactly a small distillery. But anyway, so they've substituted some Trinidad for that, so that'll be interesting to see. Third bottling is another one in the Black Tot range. This is a relatively new bottling called Solera, again bottled at 46.2%, a blend of 20% unaged Guyana, 35% 5-year-old Barbados, 40% 3 to 5-year-old Guyana and 5% 0 to 5-year-old Jamaican. Ooh, is unaged Jamaican, probably from Hampton. Ooh, that's going to be fun. Anyway, so I would guess that's probably closer to the Black Tot Finest original blend, I would have thought, because basically this was then blended and then spent 5 years in a Solera, which was comprised of 60% Oloroso and 40% PX casks, hence the darker colour. And probably you could probably see why Ronza Kappa claim that their darkness comes from the sherry casks rather than from a chunk of E150. So yeah, that's the three of the bottlings in the Black Tot range we're going to look at. Then we're going to move on to two of the Transcontinental Rums. The first one is a 7-year-old Australian. This is bottled at 48%. It's molasses-based pot still from an unspecified distillery in Queensland. Now apparently there are an inordinate amount of rum distilleries in Queensland, so I've got no idea which one it comes from, but it's basically spent 5 years aging in Australia with a further 2 years in Europe in cognac casks. And this is another interesting thing that I've noticed about a lot of newish rums that have come to the market. They are starting to become a lot more transparent with regards to where the casks spent their time, how long they spent in situ, shall we say, and how long they've spent in Europe. Whether it has any sort of a huge amount of difference. Well, I mean, it's obviously going to have some difference on the style of the spirit, but it's just nice to know that kind of thing. As individuals, we want to know. Anyway, so moving on to the second of the Transcontinental Rum bottlings. This is a UK exclusive single cask. I believe the cask, well, the number, whether this is a cask number or a batch number or whatever, is F14 7 TD32, I believe. Can't even read my own writing here. And again, this is a Fijian rum, 10 years old, bottled, distilled in 2014 and bottled last year. 2 years aging in Fiji, and then 8 years in Europe in ex-bourbon casks. Right, so the final bottling we'll be looking at, like I said, is the Providence Haitian Rum. This is a 3-year-old rum. I think this is the third official release from the distillery, and basically the distillery is very much geared towards traditional methods, the use of dunder to kickstart the fermentation. They also use specific sugarcane varieties. This is made from sugarcane syrup crystalline. Apparently, I don't know my I don't know my varieties of sugarcane. And it's continuous. It's double distilled, I believe, in a Muller pot still. One assumes a German manufactured pot still, with a first distillation bringing it up to 25 to 30%, and the second up to 72 to 78%. It's then blended, or well, say blended, it's then aged in a number of different cask types. Some of them have been reused Provenance rum casks, bourbon, ex-bourbon casks, and ex-Trinidadian Caroni casks. So really geeked out here with this particular one. It's almost as geeky as Waterford's rum, or Renegade rum I should say, but so I think that'll be an interesting one to end with. But first off, let's have a look at the old bottling of Black Tot. Okay, so on to the old bottling of Black Tot Finest Caribbean. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Quite dense, quite woody, quite tannic, dried fruits, dried apricot, dark honey. You know, I just feel the sort of like the edginess of the herbal edginess of the Guyana. It's got an almost kind of barley-like note coming through. Don't get a great deal of the Hampton. It's very much compressed. Well, I mean, you can just smell a little bit of funkiness right in the background. Yeah, I mean, that's a lovely rum. I really warmed to this rum. It has a distinctly old-fashioned kind of rum feel to it. A little bit of vanilla, a little bit of oak. Again, oak is kind of very restrained, and it's all about the blend of spirits. And like I said, you know, it's certainly got that slightly herbal Guyanan character with a nice richness of Barbadian fruit underneath that. Let's see what it passes like. Dense, dark, again quite woody, but not very vanilla'd. So it's got more of a wood tannins, a little bit of wood smoke. Lovely dried fruit, again lots of Barbadian character there, that sort of soft, but and then the edginess of the slightly herbal sort of Guyanan coming through as well. Again, the Hampton, or I'm pretty certain it's Hampton, funkiness is very much in the background. It's just there, and it's just not overpowering, which is really good. I mean, I love Hampton, I love funkiness, but you know, a lot of people really can't get on with that. But it just adds that sort of edge to the character of the spirit. Lovely sort of length, got a nice kind of dark chocolate molasses, slightly dark treacly kind of finish. Although it's not over sweet, there is a sweetness there. But I wouldn't say that it's particularly sort of sweet. Certainly not in, say, the Diplomatico kind of sweetness. So, lovely rum. I've always really liked that. So that's a nice one to start with. Okay, so moving on to the new blend Black Tot Finest Caribbean. Let's see how that differs. Remarkably different. Yeah, it's got a lot lighter nose. I suspect more column still spirit. A lot more fruit as well. It's almost kind of tropical with pineapple, apricot, and a bit more Jamaican funk, because it's not quite so woody and dark and tannic. Because it's got more lightness of character, it seems to have allowed that sort of the Hampton note to come through a little bit more. Again, it's not sort of OTT on the Hampton, and it's giving it a nice kind of balance of the sweetness. So it's obviously the Trinidadian rum is giving it a lot more kind of classical dried fruits and sort of tropical notes. And where it doesn't quite have the herbal notes coming from the Guyanan, the Hampton is kind of like coming through a bit more to kind of add a kind of a counterbalance. Definitely different. Difficult to say whether I prefer one to the other, because I think they're really both very, very good. Anyway, let's sort of pass on. Again, lighter, tastes younger as well, doesn't seem to have quite so much of the age, and that may well be another factor why the blend was changed. Again, more high-toned column still notes, lighter, again more fruit, more tropical character, bit more of the Hampton funk coming through on the mid palate and certainly into the finish. It's got that slight sort of greenness there as well, green pepper, spice. It's got a real nippiness, and I guess that's kind of more down to the youthful elements, I think. Certainly I can almost taste some sort of young new make kind of rum coming through right on the finish, and you know what, I like that. I mean, like I said, it is very different to the previous bottling of Black Tot. It's hard to sort of like say, like I said, one is better than the other. They are both really good. They're both really different. And I guess the thing is that if you're a fan of the old-fashioned style of Black Tot, you're going to have to do some recalibration, and hopefully, the new blend will basically be appreciated as well. But obviously, if you're not told that it's a new blend, then you're probably going to be quite surprised. But anyway, really enjoyed that. That's very good. Okay, so let's move on to the Black Tot Historic Solera. Let's see what the nose gives on this end, shall we? Well, straight off you can get the sherry influence. It's got that kind of rich, oxidised sherry character, some cocoa bean. There's also a bit of tonka bean as well, and that seems to be quite sort of noticeable. Molasses, more heavier, darker, richer. Basically this is aimed at the customers that like Diplomatico. Not as sweet as Diplomatico, because again doesn't appear to be sweetened post distillation, so the sweetness is naturally coming from the sherry casks, but that's the kind of people that it's being aimed at. Got a really nice silkiness, works quite nicely. I like it. I like the sort of the melding of the sherry and the spirit. Again, I think it's really nicely balanced, and it shows that the spirit has the cojones to kind of stand up to sort of being hammered by a bit of sherry. Anyway, let's see what pass on. Oh, there's a lot more Hampton funk on the palate. That's a real funky finish, it has to be said. Herbal green peppers and green spice. There's a slight rawness, but then the sort of like the silkiness of the PX kind of comes back on the finish. It kicks off more with the Oloroso, it has to be said. And again, it's got that beaniness there, that tonka bean, cacao bean, dark chocolate, raisinated fruit. A little bit more heavier on the Oloroso on the palate, and like I said, it kind of like bookends. It sort of starts with the Oloroso, finishes with the PX, and there's some nice character in between the two woods, shall we say. So on the whole, I think that works quite nicely. I like the progression. That's another thing that I look for. Aside from balance, I don't particularly want a spirit to kind of like tell me everything right from the word go. I like it to open up and unwind and progress through some changes. So on that point, yeah, really like that. Good. Okay, so on to the first of the two Transcontinental rums. This is the 7-year-old Australian. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? I often say about Australian whiskey that it's kind of not exactly very subtle, and their rum is following a very similar kind of line. It's very unsubtle in regards to the oak. There is an absolute forest of the stuff. Toasted, grippy vanillas, a lot of American oak. There's a edgy sort of European French tannins. I'm not really getting an inordinate amount of spirit character. There's a bit of dried fruit, a little bit of spice, some cinnamon possibly, but it's really all about the oak, and it's just too oaked in my personal opinion. Too much oak, not enough distillery or spirit character. Not that I know what distillery is, so yeah, let's do a pass one. Now, although this is 48%, it tastes lighter than the previous bottling, which is 46.2%. And again, it's very oaky, not in that kind of overt vanilla, but an overt tannic. So I'm getting a lot of kind of grippy tannins, dried tannins, some vanillins, a little bit of dried fruit. I mean, it does. The spirit character comes through on the finish. The oak seems to be relatively short-lived. It has to be said. It's kind of like, does its bit and then goes bleh. And then the spirit does come through on the finish, but it doesn't really have an inordinate amount of character. It seems to me column still. It has that lightness, that sort of sultanery kind of fruit, a little bit of spice, touch of herbal notes, but doesn't really kind of have a great deal of complexity. And for me, I'm not really gonna rave about that. It's just a bit overly oaked, and yeah, there you go. Right, okay, so moving on to the 10-year-old Fijian Transcontinental rum. So this time cask strength, I would imagine, at 54%. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Ooh, mother! I mean, is that 10? Doesn't smell like it. Smells like maybe 10 months old. Wow, that's young, that's raw. Rose petal mar. Real rum, I'll give you that. I mean, you'll put hairs on your chest. I mean, that's really funky. I mean, I thought Hampton was funky. My God, there's got nothing on this. I mean, this is Funk City. It has to be like, get the funk out. A little bit of pineapple, possibly. Some herbal notes, but it's just raw. It's just way, way too young. I mean, even though it's 10 years old, it's just, like I said, it could be 10 months old in reality. It's just not kind of developed. It's not softened. I mean, now, if you're a real rum aficionado and you love real rum, then you're going to love this. But most people, and I've done rum tastings, it has to be said, where I've put on, this kind of style of rum, and most people just are really not into it. They don't get it. It's just a bit too much. It's a bit too raw. So from a commercial angle, its market is really, really limited. Anyway, let's see what the pal's like. God almighty. Alcoholic. I mean, alcohol from the word go. I mean, it's just, I mean, it is only 54%, but my God, you can taste that. Again, it's really funky. It's really herbal. It's out-funking Hampton, it has to be said. I mean, it's raw, it's young. And although, like I said, it says 10 on the tin, it doesn't taste like a 10-year-old rum whatsoever. Like I said, it tastes like it's 10 months old. And that's it. There's a latent pineapple and apricot and slight tropical note kind of coming through, but it's real, and it's real rum. It's, you know, I remember tasting stuff like this when I first sort of started in the industry, sort of plantation stuff, and it was kind of like, oh my God, what the hell is that? I mean, it was just like, I'd never come across anything quite like it, has to be said. Well, water doesn't really do an awful lot to it, to be honest with you. It's still pretty raw, pretty young, pretty funky, and like I said, it's a limited market for this kind of stuff. Let's see what it passes like. That's really brought out the oils. It's kind of almost like pure linseed oil. I mean, it's short, it kind of doesn't really go very far, and it's just too young at the end of the day. And like I said, it's interesting, you know, from a kind of a technical point of view, but sometimes these kind of interesting technical spirits are not exactly the sort of thing that you really want to drink all the time. And like I said, if you like real rum, if you love the Hampton funk and all that kind of stuff, you're going to love this. But again, like I said, that is a very small market. Most rum drinkers seem to prefer, well, there's a good reason why Diplomatico, well, certainly as far as I'm concerned, in Nottingham is certainly the biggest selling rum, because that's the sort of stuff that people like, you know. Right, okay, so on to the final rum of the afternoon. This is the 3-year-old Haitian rum. Let's see what the notice is on this end, shall we, sir? My God, that's another oak monster. It does seem to me that whoever puts these together for the Maison de Whiskey loves oak. I mean, it's pure bourbon. I'm getting lots of that sort of big bourbon-y vanilla. There's some rye notes, and you know, I smell this and I think, well, what was the point? You went to all this effort to sort of, like, you know, in sort of selecting a specific variety of cane, you distilled it in a specific way, and you were all about probably the terroir and all this kind of stuff, and then you smother it all in oak. I mean, I'm sorry, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. There's a little bit of agricoliness there, but I mean, all I can smell is sweet oak, you know. Yeah, there's some nice dried fruit. I mean, okay, putting all that to one side, it's a very appealing nose, but then that's a very oaky nose. It's a very kind of, you know, you put that in a lineup with a load of bourbons and you would probably not have picked that as a rum. I mean, that is how much influence the bourbon casks have had on this. And Caroni casks, well, don't get any kind of Caroni character whatsoever. And like I said, how many of the sort of ex-Providence rum casks go into that, I have no idea. But anyway, let's see what it passes like. Marginally better balanced, I would say, but still overly oaky. It's got a big buttery, sort of vanilla, American oak kind of almost, the sort of stuff that, if that was a wine, that would be a sort of like, you know, a Grand Cru Burgundy that had been smothered in new American oak, which really never does it for me at all, as we said. It's again quite masked, a little bitter on the finish, a little bit of Haitian character, but you again, you know, on the palate it would differentiate itself from a bourbon, obviously, but I've still got a lot of that kind of bourbony, fat vanilla and fat corn, and again it just asks the question, what was the point? I mean, you know, okay, less American oak, less first fill, I would imagine American oak as well. You know, if you want to sort of bring out the spirit character and the terroir and the sort of the character of the sugar cane, why use so much first fill American oak? Anyway, let's put a little drop of water with it and see whether that actually sort of mitigates some of that oak, because often that does have a tendency to do that, a little drop of water. No is the honest answer. There's practically no change whatsoever. It's still an oak monster, and this is a classic example of, people seem to think that I have it in for sherry matured spirits because sherry blankets the character of the spirit, and this just goes to show that American oak can do exactly the same thing, and that to me is it doesn't matter what the oak is. If there's too much of it and it's unbalanced, it's not particularly interesting. Let's do the part on now. Again, exactly the same. Softer now. It's actually lost some of that spirit character now because it's kind of lost the alcoholic intensity. And again, like I said, I hate to keep harping on about it, but it's just not got any balance to it. So, if I was doing this, number 4, bottling number 4, I would kind of seriously consider how much of first fill American oak matured spirit you're going to actually use in that, because to me that just has no interest whatsoever, I'm afraid. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to Speciality Brands for the samples for today's episode of the show. I hope you think it's been a constructive appraisal. The Black Tot Finest, it's different, okay? The new blend is significantly different from the old, and I suppose if you're going to do a big radical overhaul, all that kind of stuff, you may as well go, you know, you may as well do it big time. You may as well just go, yeah, okay, we've had to change the blend, and it's totally different to the old one. And to be honest with you, I like the new blend. I like the sort of the esteriness. I like the tropical fruit notes. I like that type of rum. I like the fact that, you know, it's, and this is one of the things that I try and say to customers about blends of all different types, is that what you're getting is something that doesn't exist in nature, you know, and that encapsulates that. It's got that lovely kind of tropical character, and the Hampton funk comes through and just gives it a little bit of an edge. Not too much, just enough. So if you want to, you know, move from sort of rums like Diplomatico, for argument's sake, and Dawleys or what have you, Seals, into the sort of maybe the more kind of, I don't want to use the term natural end of the rum spectrum, the funky end of the spectrum, shall we? Yeah, that's a better way of looking at it. Then this is kind of a nice lead in, and if you kind of like that like edge, yeah, then go whole hog and get your Hampton now, you know. Anyway, the Solera, yeah, okay, I like that. Yep, obviously lots of influence from the sherry cask, not a surprise there. But again, I thought it had some nice balance. It kind of worked well. it had that slightly darker feel. It's probably, again, like I said, if you're going to try and wean yourself off Diplomatico, and I'm not saying Diplomatico is a bad rum whatsoever, but if that's kind of like where you've started with that kind of big sweetness, and you're kind of weaning yourself off that and into a more natural style of rum, then this kind of really is your kind of next port of call before moving into that kind of direction. So yeah, really good. And this is the thing, it's not just about sort of producing a really good spirit, it's kind of thinking about where its place in the market is, and you know, listening to the marketing monkeys occasionally, I suppose. And then on to the Transcontinental Australia. Yeah, kind of typical, I guess, Australian fodder at the end of the day. It doesn't have any real subtlety, it's kind of all a bit kind of in your face and a bit too much oak. And that was kind of a bit disappointing in my personal opinion. The Fijian, again, sort of, I don't know, it was 10 years old, I know, but here it goes. You know, when you talk about a spirit will tell you when it's ready for bottling. It doesn't matter whether it's kind of, you know, 6 months old, 6 years, 10 years, whatever, you know. There is a point where a spirit is ready for bottling, and that that was not ready for bottling, it has to be said. That was way too young. That cask should have been sat on for a long time, or should have just been blended in with something else, to be bluntly honest with you, because it tasted like 10 months rather than 10 years, it has to be said. And I think I said a fair amount about the provenance. It was just, to me, just again an oak monster, and didn't really have enough shade, shall we say. But anyway, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. I personally thought it was a great episode. I like the new Black Tot bottling, so, you know, like I said, you know, if you're a kind of a Diplomatico drinker, that kind of thing, go for the Solera bottling first, then try some other things, and then maybe you may well get into a bit of Hampton. Anyway, good afternoon and good dramming.
See your smile, your face, searching for the light to cancel the madness of